we also have the Canadian Border Agency, so another failed federal agency that prioritizes DEI hires and really loves having drag events. There's been multiple footage releases over the last few years during this Pride season that we all are so joyously forced to partake in.
Oh,
Where
shame
you
season.
have Canada Border Service agents getting lap dances from drag queens. But anyway, I digress. CBSA, this comes from the Globe and Mail, is now investigating whether suspected senior Iranian officials were allowed entry into Canada. I mean, you don't say. Canadian border authorities say they're investigating or taking enforcement action in 66 cases involving suspected senior Iranian officials who may have been allowed into Canada despite a law. Of course, there's a law that has not been upheld that bars them from entering the country or remaining in it. And so of those 66, they say that 20 have been identified as inadmissible. And then the rest of them, I think, are just kind of expected to leave based on good faith.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, well, we know from CBSA official numbers, which, I mean, they're official, but they really have no idea. It's anywhere from 200 to 500,000, 500,000 refugees who are not eligible to stay in the country, that are supposed to leave and have been given deportation orders that they just lost track of. We just don't know where they are.
Yep. But when we, not to sound too much like a broken record, but when the CBSA, this is a quote, welcomes applications from all equity and diversity groups and takes concrete actions to end racism and discrimination by embedding equality into our culture, programs, and policies, what do you think is going to happen? You think that the people that belong to all of these, ID groups are going to kick out people also from their same ID group? Like, what happened to prioritizing Canadians to work at CBSA? If we had people with dogs in the race, perhaps 200,000 to 500,000 people wouldn't have even made it past our front door. And yet, this is what we've got with another federal government agency that's wholly committed to DEI and crazy woke initiatives. They have gender-based analysis plus, Indigenous advisory circles, LGBTQ2+ advisory committees, the Next Generation Network, Persons with Disabilities and Advisory Committee, Visible Minorities Advisory Committee, and Women's Advisory Committee. What does this have to do with protecting our border, CBSA? What exactly does this have to do with protecting our border? This sounds like public sector unions just running amok, going, well, we need to make work for all of our people that can't work, but are dedicated to DEI. Either you're dedicated to safeguarding Canada's borders or you're dedicated to DEI. You can't have both.
Well, and it says join a team that listens. I'd like to join the team that's like the voice of reason and rational, logical thinking. Like, do we have one of those? Is there anybody out there at the CBSA that has a logic, rational thinking group or board? Because I'd like to be part of it.
Yeah. The Common Sense Committee?
Yeah.
The CSC? How many people have joined that? Oh, that's right. They don't have a Common Sense Committee. They have what was the best one here? Oh, the Next Generation Network, the Gender-Based Analysis Plus Committee. That's what CBSA has. I mean, Canada, that like, not to say that every single public institution that's funded by federal dollars is an absolute complete laughing joke, but they are.
Well,
and they're wondering,
well,
and then CBSA will be like, how come public trust in our institution has dropped this much? Well, because you tell us what you're doing on the internet and then expect this to you expect the borders while you're all in your struggle sessions and in your LGBTQIA committees, you expect the border to police itself. This is why the public's trust in you has plummeted to unprecedented levels. May as well just do yourself a favor and flush. Okay, CBSA, just flush. Start again.
Well, what did you say? It's a next generation committee?
A Next Generation Network. Yeah.
Oh my
They have
gosh.
7 committees and networks led by senior level champions. Okay, so they're senior, their most experienced people are are leading these committees and networks, and this is a quote, "to ensure that all voices are
Yeah.
heard." How
Well, I
about
want
listening to
my
the bad
voice
guys on
heard.
the border? Yeah, well, how about listening to the bad guys on the border who say they're gonna do us dirty in Canada? How about that? How about start listening to those guys instead, CBSA? Just wild.
Well, and
Just
speaking of
wild.
the this next generation network, which I mean, I guess if you can infer anything from people who don't have the ability to vote or buy alcohol,
Mhm.
Canada's youngest adults, this comes from the National Post, are more
Oh,
likely to trust Iran and its current regime, according to a poll. They seem to have a much softer view on Iran's intentions and the intentions of the Iranian regime, says Association for Canadian Studies Jack Jedwab. Which
yep.
so this is just absolute craziness here, and I want to just go back to that CBSA, the article that we are
Mhm.
just referring to, because so the federal government expanded this measure to not allow, which obviously hasn't worked because now they're saying that there are a bunch of senior level Iranian officials that were allowed entry into Canada.
Yep.
So they attempted to expand the measure to not allow them into the country for anyone that served in the Iranian government from June 2003, which was the date that that Iranian Canadian photojournalist Zara Kazemi was arrested while taking pictures outside of a prison in Tehran. She was tortured
Hmm.
while in detention and died a few weeks later. And so I was like, who was this? And so I was looking her up this morning. And that story, what that woman endured, I think it was 19, almost 20 days total that she was detained by the regime, was absolutely horrific. And for
Hmm.
us to have young Canadians more likely to trust this same regime is absolutely a failure of our education system to
Oh,
teach history and what actually happens in these countries.
girl,
It's horrible, horrible.
this is absolutely the predictable result of Canadian education, the entire industry, the education
Yeah.
industry in Canada, indoctrinating children for an entire generation. So you give kids 12 years of left-wing indoctrination, of struggle sessions, of left-wing activism, and this is the predictable result. We have
Mhm.
kids who are sympathetic to Iran. This is a terrorist state. These are bad guys who do nothing good for the world. These are militant bad guys. And yet our kids are being shuttled through an education system where they're told, oh, but they're just oppressed. The Iranian people are just, the country of Iran has been so maligned and so, so downtrodden. We must join the resistance and we must support them in their resistance. This is what we're getting, Canada. It's actually I know I sound like a broken record, but this should be of real concern. This should be a real concern to Canada that we've got a bunch of little left-wing activists been churned out by our public education systems.
Well, and just look no further than, and maybe take up some Googling, than the Red Guard and Maoism. And that will give
Huh.
you a good indication of the trajectory that many of our publicly funded students are currently on.